everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to survivors across the world who have experienced child sexual abuse. My name's Gloria Masters and I'm your host. Today I'm bringing you a feature special and it's actually about me. So some of you have been asking if I could talk about my life and my journey and what has led me to do this incredible honouring work that I do. So here goes. Unfortunately, I was born into a family where child sex trafficking seemed to be a feature. So what that meant for me was from a very small age, I was hurt by my father and trained by my grandmother to become the best child sex slave I could be. That was to continue until I was 16 years old. And although my mother was living in the house until I was 11, she did not intervene or tend to get involved or even consider what it was that I may be going through. What that transpired to for me was feeling that I didn't matter, that I didn't count, and that it was up to me to look out for me. I'm sure you're starting to feel into how devastating and lonely that was. I was frightened a lot of the time. I had very big men who would pay a lot of money to hurt me, and I had no empathy or love or support from anyone. No one really cared. To say it's a miracle I survived, I believe, is understating it. But I know that I'm here and that I'm here for a purpose, and handing the shame back is a big part of that. I'm telling you all of this because I recognize that in our wonderful survivor family, we each have different experiences, and that what you went through is nowhere near less important or less significant than anything I went through. Why? Because our trauma responses are the same. So it's that first time. It's what's evoked in us in that first time that creates the memory, the imprint, and the body never forgetting what actually went on. But I digress. Let me take you back to my life. So as a small child, my disposition was sunny. I was happy. I was a kid who wanted to explore the world. Everything was magical to me. And I think to have my spirit crushed by being exploited and used was devastating. But there was a part of me, inside of me, that always sought the light and always looked for something to celebrate. And the good news is I still have that in me today. So my father had many, many groups he would traffic me to. Some were Freemasons. There were political people in our country as well. And, these were not easy people to be around. I had many experiences where I thought I would die. I did experience satanic ritual abuse. Yes, it is a thing. I also experienced electric shock therapy. I had such horror occur that I think one of my worst memories was being leased to a gang. I left there over a weekend for an initiation ceremony and being beaten so badly that I was unrecognisable. And my father's response when he picked me up was to the gang leader, "You may not want to do that to her, mate, she won't look as good for you next time. So that gives you a little window into what I had to endure. That happened to me physically, and then as I grew older, my parents decided to divorce. Now, legally, I can't really talk about or name my siblings, but my sisters left with my mother, and I was left in the house with my father and my brother, who was his mini-me. The horror I had endured until that point seemed insignificant compared to what I now had to endure without an adult female in the house. Remembering she was your classic narcissist, it was all about her. She didn't really look out for me, but at least if she was there, there was some tempering around behaviour being exhibited. So once she'd gone, I was thrown in the deep end. That was the worst time of my life, and it was during that period that I tried to take my own life 3 times. Luckily, I didn't make it. So I think for me, the horror of recognizing that I was trapped in this house, and the girl that left for school in the morning and would go and spend every second weekend with her mother was never the same child that returned to my father. The fact that this could go on and the fact that this did go on in New Zealand is untenable. But I just want to point out, please, New Zealand is just like any other country. We're just a smaller version of other countries. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it has divine landscape and water and mountains. We're very blessed. But equally, there's an underbelly, and equally, child sexual abuse and trafficking happens in this country. I think it's time for blinkers to come off. Anyway, I've digressed again. Let's go back. Once I was left with my father and brother, as you know, the horror ensued, and my brother became my worst abuser because he would then invite his friends round and they would rape me. They would chase me, they would taunt me, they would terrorize me. And I had horrible things happen to me simply because there was no filter and he could do what he liked. I guess the telling point for me, or what saved my life, was coming home from school one day and early and hearing laughter from my father's bedroom. And it was a woman, and I walked down and she's lying in bed with him, and I just froze, panicked, and took off, and I raced up to my mother's house, which was about 5 kilometres away, and I couldn't speak. I was shaking and sobbing and in such shock. And I can hear you thinking, why were you in such shock? Well, what you don't know is that I had become not only my father's key money earner through the sex trade, but also his mistress. So my young mind, this was me at the age of 12 and a half, was quite confused and I didn't know what to do. You see, when the only love you get is through an abusive psychopath, you take what you can get. And so to then realize I'd been replaced in my young mind was horrifying. I was able to tell my mother that he had been in bed. I saw him in bed with another woman. And she rang the Catholic priest and the Archbishop of Auckland at the time, and he said the words that saved my life. Get her out of that house. It is not seemly or appropriate or safe for her to be there. I escaped. I got taken out of that house. And I know that sounds like a wonderful end to the story, but of course it's not. What happened then was I then left, but my mother would not accompany me inside to tell my father I was leaving. So you've got a frightened 12-year-old in there trying to face the monster and the nightmare head on. She sat outside in the car, and as we drove away, I was babbling away, I was crying, I was laughing, I was so relieved until she said these words. You still have to see him every second weekend and half of every school holiday. Now, I don't know about you, but my heart sank because although I had 12 days of relative safety, I was ignored, but at least I was safe. I then had to find the courage, go into the depths of my being to try and manage the 2 days of horror, because my father wanted to exploit me and exploit me as much as he could. And he was very angry that I chose to leave him. So in the telling of this, what I'm trying to give you, wonderful survivors that you are, is just a little bit of hope that even though the horror existed, and in my case it was horrendous, in your case it would have been horrendous because you had to experience it as a child. The hope is that there's a way through. In my case, I learned to go in. I learned to check in with me and the feelings and the kind of the part of me, the spiritual part, I guess, that I began to listen to. And that helped me. And that is why my memoir is called On Angels' Wings, because I connected with angels and I felt their love around me. I don't think I would be alive without that. So, between 12 and a half and 16, yes, so we had to go back. Yes, it was terrible. I had many forced abortions on me by my grandmother. I nearly died because, of course, the way she tried to abort was pretty medically negligent. I was leased out of a nightclub in our red light district in Auckland, in a back room on the top floor, where men and women would pay to come and abuse me. I had many occasions where I would be tied to a bedhead, where men would have a raffle, if you like, and the prize was me, and whichever way and however many others they wanted involved could abuse me. So to say dissociation was a friend of mine is, I'm sure, something you can relate to. I couldn't stay in my body with any of that. What I learned to do with the going within was to try and just take one breath after another and one step at a time. But the magical day I turned 16, I was free. I never had to go back to see my father again. And that is why our Global Awareness Day was born. And the 16th, the number 16 is hugely significant to me. In the bringing of all of this to you is the work that I now do. And this is not a job. This is not a profession. This is not a calling. This is actually my purpose in life. And my purpose in life is to help others through shining light on this darkness with love and humility. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that. Healing is hard. Healing is never linear. There is not one size that fits all. Some days can be very triggering. Most of the time, with the decades of work I've managed to do, which I will share with you, I come out okay. I still have humour. Sorry about that. No, I'm not sorry. We've got to be who we are. But I have great love and respect and empathy for you amazing survivors out there. Why? Because I actually understand. I understand how difficult it is to manage all of this. Let me share with you what happened. Again, I'm quite good at digressing, I think you would agree. Let's go back to post 16. Between about 16 and 22, I was out of control. I was so traumatized. I didn't understand it, but I was doing dreadful things. I didn't really do drugs because I'd been drugged so much as a child and teenager. They just didn't have appeal for me, but I certainly drank a lot. I slept with way too many people. I had an eating disorder, and partly that was due to being starved because my father had felt through those 16 years of trafficking that the pedophiles would pay more money if I looked underweight, and it made me look younger. So food became a real issue for me, and not surprisingly, in my later life, I had bulimia, and that was really shameful for me actually, because at the time I was teaching and my weight would kind of move or oscillate between very, very underweight to quite overweight, and I just knew there was something wrong, but I hadn't actually recovered memories, though clearly I had repressed all of them. It was too hard for me to stay in my body up until the age of 16, so I left, willingly left. But then, of course, as things do, it was my time to deal with it. So as a teacher, I had no recollection. I loved kids with a passion, and my superpower with children was to always see the beauty in them, no matter whether they were deemed to be unlikable. I managed to find something, and that's always been my gift to children. I will always look out for and love children. Um, the uh, the fact that no memory had surfaced was fine by me, but I was quite disconnected from myself. I I was able to do my best as a teacher, but I didn't have self-esteem. I married men who didn't see the value in me, and I don't blame them for that. It was how I saw myself. So how could I attract that which was of value to me? Once I had my children, I left teaching, but as is what happens with a lot of us as survivors who are parents, the memories can start and we can become very, very triggered when our same-sex child is born, which is what happened to me. So all of a sudden, I'm launched into this nightmare. And when I say nightmare, I mean I didn't want to go to sleep. I was terrified, frankly. The images I was seeing, it almost had me question my sanity. I had two small children. I was raising them alone, and I was absolutely traumatized. So I did go to my mother and I did say, Mum, I think, I'm pretty sure I was sexually abused. And her response, and I'll show it to you, was, you have no right to ever speak of this. to anyone in the family about this, ever. What's your feeling, survivor family? Where's the empathy? Where was the horror? Where was the outcry? So that's what I had to deal with. And she then went and manipulated the rest of the family to not believe me. So not only was I dealing with two small, beautiful children, I was dealing with the memories coming at a speed of knots like you haven't seen. And I also had my whole family turn against me. So I became labelled a liar, deluded, evil, always been a troublemaker, black sheep. So that was really hard, actually. And it took me a lot. It took me a lot to unpack, and it took me a lot of years of healing and dedicated healing, lots of different modalities, before I could hold my head up high and think, I'm not going to be gaslit anymore. I'm going to speak my truth. So my second book, Flight Path to Healing, is actually dedicated to survivors, and it's actually a workbook for you to be able to use to help navigate your own journey. We're all different. That's why it's a flight path. You get a boarding pass, by the way, when you get on the plane, because you're a survivor. But there's lots of your destination and your travel log will be different to mine. But I've written it in a way that I think you will appreciate. It is able to be written in, it is able to be worked with, so that at the end of each chapter, you have spaces to write, you have questions to answer, and you have a beautiful mantra with a picture just for you. It can be taken out of the book and put on the fridge or wherever you like. How do I know it's helpful? Because survivors like you reach out and say it really spoke to them. The next part of my life was me going back to university and becoming a child and adolescent psychotherapist. No surprises, is it, when you look back and your life reflects what you went through as a child. So I went back, and it was a very select few that got chosen. It was quite a lot of hoops to be jumped through, which I'm pleased about, because, you know, we are talking about children and adolescents and their mental health and their trauma. But I was so grateful I got to run my own clinic and work with incredible families. I had to go to court sometimes I was summoned or subpoenaed to talk about the children that were being abused in my area, and cases I was dealing with. But it was such an honour, actually, to bring some wisdom and some light to these families and to these beautiful children, and I'll never forget that. But as we know, sometimes heal thyself. So I was drawn to it to heal myself as well. And of course, that took many, many decades. As you know, I started in my early 30s. So after that, I then ran another business called Masters of Communication. I know, isn't it clever? Where I went into companies and helped them with communication with their team, their kind of strategy, any change staff, any difficult people. In fact, I must have done quite well, because they started calling me the fixer on LinkedIn, and I'd get called into lots of companies to help with difficult people and situations. And look, I'm proud of that work, and everything leads to the next thing, doesn't it? So that carried on, and then I ended up being shoulder tapped and knocked around a bit psychologically to start writing my book, writing the memoir. And that took 3 years. It was a big job. And look, it was double-edged. It was cathartic. It was great to release and make sense of things that I hadn't previously. But it was also absolutely gut-wrenchingly sad. I felt the pain of it and looked at my younger self through different eyes and thought, what an amazing child and teenager, and how lucky I made it through. So that happened. And then, of course, I came up with Handing the Shame Back. And I chose that as a title for the charity and for the YouTube channel, which, by the way, you are now watching and which does have 5,000 subscribers. And it was chosen because, to me, out of secrecy, silence, and shame takes the gold. And by that I mean, for us as survivors, we have huge shame, and it began because we were children and we were manipulated or groomed into thinking we were complicit, or that it was our fault the abuse even happened. And through my years of healing, I was able to discern, actually, the shame never belonged to me. So I started handing the shame back. And that is what you see, and that is what you get to experience on our website as well. Lots and lots of goodies, resources, tips, techniques for you, and also for supporters of survivors. I've written my 3rd book because I'm very big on advocacy, protection, and education about children. And that book's called Keeping Kids Safe. And it's a roadmap for parents, teachers, and others. Why, I hear you ask? Because people don't know what they don't know. And this is such a delicate topic for so many people who are in such shock that this even exists. I'm trying to give parents and educators information that they can easily use, develop, and provide to children. Things like body safety rules, believe it or not. Things like how to spot when a child is experiencing child sexual abuse. Things like the impact on them as parents. Things like ways to manage disclosure. So there's, I think, 11 modules in the book. Again, I'm a very practical person, so I write to benefit you, and it is a workbook, so you can go in there and you can work on it. It has a checklist at the end of each module, which means you can cherry pick those aspects you want to take action on. My great honour to bring that to the world. It's already won a few awards, says she, who actually I don't really have a big ego, as you would know. But the point being, it's time for the world to unite and stand strongly in respect of our children.